There is a peculiar silence that falls whenever one confronts the notion of truth. It is not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of standing before something immense, something that stretches beyond the frail categories of human thought. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast ocean at midnight, its surface shimmering under a moonlight that refuses to fully reveal what lies beneath. You know the ocean is there, its weight undeniable, yet its depths remain concealed. That is the silence of truth, felt but not entirely seen, acknowledged yet elusive. And this is precisely the silence that Arthur Schopenhauer walked into, a silence that still echoes across time, calling to those who dare to ask if what they think they know is merely a mirage. To say, if you think you know truth, watch this, is already to step onto dangerous ground, because truth, by its very nature, is not a possession but a mystery. It slips through our fingers like water, defying our attempts to grasp it with certainty. Schopenhauer's philosophy does not flatter us with easy answers. It does not promise that truth is waiting in a simple formula, nor does it assure us that peeling back one layer of illusion reveals a final, permanent foundation. Instead, he challenges us to recognize that what we call reality may be a carefully woven veil, a tapestry embroidered with appearances, desires, and conditioned beliefs, hiding the raw fabric beneath. His work invites us not only to question the world but to question the very eyes through which we see the world. The introduction to this exploration must itself feel like a threshold, for truth is not something one approaches casually. Consider the child staring at the night sky for the first time, awestruck by the sheer number of stars. At first, the child sees dots of light scattered on a black canvas. Only later do they learn that each star is a sun, burning with unfathomable fire, surrounded by its own mysteries. That shift, from surface perception to depth recognition, is a small mirror of the journey Schopenhauer compels us to take. He whispers, almost cruelly, that the life we take for granted, the identities we wear like costumes, the world we insist is solid and unshakable, is built upon illusion. And yet, far from despair, there is a strange liberation in this recognition, as though realizing that the prison door was never locked in the first place. Philosophy, when it ceases to be mere academic play and becomes existential confrontation, is not something to be read like a textbook. It must be lived, wrestled with, resisted, and finally allowed to dissolve the certainty we cling to. Schopenhauer, in his harsh yet luminous way, understood this. His work strikes a paradoxical balance. It strips us of comforting illusions, but in doing so, it opens a horizon vast enough to suggest that freedom and authenticity are still possible. He does not point us to a stable truth we can hold, but to an awareness of the illusions that deceive us. And in that awareness, something begins to change. The fog lifts, if only slightly, revealing that perhaps truth is less a final destination and more a constant unveiling. To approach this subject is like walking through a labyrinth. Each corridor seems to promise an exit, yet often it bends back upon itself, reminding us that the path is not straightforward. But here is the wonder: the labyrinth itself is part of the truth. The very act of seeking, of losing ourselves in the winding corridors of appearance and reality, desire and suffering, is the essence of what it means to be human. If we imagine truth as a luminous core hidden within the labyrinth, then Schopenhauer's philosophy acts less as a map and more as a lantern. It does not give us shortcuts, but it illuminates the strange beauty of the path itself. And what is this lantern made of? It is forged from his central idea that the world we know is but representation, a stage on which phenomena play, while behind the curtain, there pulses an unrelenting will, blind and ceaseless. This will is not rational, not moral, not neatly ordered, it is raw striving, an endless current of becoming. Suddenly, truth is no longer the serene temple we imagined, but a wild storm, a torrent that shapes mountains, drives human longing, and even dictates the beating of our hearts. To see this is to confront a reality both terrifying and sublime. Yet, paradoxically, this very recognition carries with it the seed of transcendence. For in realizing that so much of what we take as truth is but representation, we also recognize the possibility of stepping outside the game. Illusion is not just deception, it is also invitation. The veil that conceals also hints at what lies beyond. Like the desert mirage that tricks the traveler into thirst, it nevertheless directs the gaze toward the horizon, toward the direction of water, real or imagined. In this way, Schopenhauer's exposure of illusion is not meant to crush the human spirit, but to awaken it. To awaken is never painless, but it is necessary if one wishes to live beyond the shallow comfort of half-truths. This is why beginning such an exploration requires reverence. To merely summarize Schopenhauer's insight as the world is illusion is to flatten what is in fact a profound existential earthquake. His vision calls us to wrestle with our own perceptions, to test the solidity of the ground beneath our feet, to ask whether what we call truth is truth at all, or simply the shadow play of deeper forces. It is a call that resounds like a cosmic riddle. If you think you know, you do not. If you admit you do not know, perhaps then you begin to see. So let this introduction serve as an opening of the curtain, revealing not the final act, but the first glimpse of the stage where truth and illusion entwine in their eternal dance. Ahead lies a journey through themes that question the very foundation of human experience, narratives that weave symbolic insight into the fabric of philosophy, and reflections on how these realizations alter the way we live in the everyday. It will be both unsettling and illuminating, disorienting yet strangely clarifying. For in questioning what we know, we may finally arrive at a deeper seeing, not of answers carved in stone, but a vision unclouded by illusion. When one moves beyond the initial threshold of Schopenhauer's vision, the terrain becomes both sharper and more disorienting. His philosophy is not a casual stroll through abstract thought but rather an initiation into the hidden mechanics of existence. What he offers is not the comfort of truth neatly packaged but the raw exposure of how the world operates beneath its surface appearance. It is here, in the unveiling of his core ideas, that the haunting brilliance of his thought emerges, challenging us to recognize that what we see, what we touch, and even what we feel are not the ultimate reality but a veil woven across our perception. Schopenhauer insisted that the world is representation, a theater of appearances, filtered and shaped by the structure of human consciousness. The stage is dazzling, the lights convincing, the actors persuasive, yet it remains a play. What lies behind this production is something altogether different, the relentless, unyielding force he called the will. This duality, the world as representation and the world as will, forms the foundation of his philosophy. Representation is the surface, the polished mask, the dreamlike order in which things appear separate, distinct, and rational. It is the realm of categories, where mountains rise against horizons, rivers carve valleys, and people walk as if each were an isolated island of self. Yet Schopenhauer, echoing the insights of ancient mystics and aligning in curious ways with modern physics, declared that this division is illusory. Beneath the multiplicity lies a single force, blind and ceaseless, endlessly striving and becoming. He called this will not in the sense of human intention or deliberate choice, but as the fundamental pulse of existence, the raw drive that births both galaxies and desires, storms and heartbreaks. To recognize this is to begin to see the illusion we are born into. Consider the way a dream feels real while we are inside it, the walls solid, the conversations convincing, the emotions powerful. Only upon awakening do we see the dream as a fleeting construction of the mind. Schopenhauer suggests that waking life itself is not much different. The senses, the intellect, the very structures of cognition paint for us a picture of reality, and we mistake the picture for the thing itself. Truth, in this framework, is not about adding more details to the picture but realizing that the picture is not reality at all. It is representation, a veil. And what this veil conceals is not another, clearer picture, but the force of will itself, wild, undifferentiated, indifferent. Here lies the paradox that makes Schopenhauer both unsettling and prophetic. On one hand, he denies us the comfort of believing in a rational, ordered universe designed for our benefit. He strips away the notion of a benevolent cosmos, insisting instead that the core of existence is restless striving, without ultimate aim. On the other hand, this recognition itself becomes a form of liberation. For when one sees the game as a game, one no longer plays it blindly. To awaken to the illusion is to be freed from its total hold. In this way, Schopenhauer does not merely describe a bleak vision but opens the possibility of transcendence through awareness. Consider the endless cycle of human desire. We long for something, believing its attainment will bring fulfillment. For a moment, perhaps, the hunger subsides. Yet almost immediately, new desires emerge, tugging us into the same pursuit, again and again. This is the movement of the will within us, disguised as personal ambition, craving, or passion. Desire, attainment, dissatisfaction, and renewed longing, it is the rhythm that beats beneath every human life. Schopenhauer exposes this cycle not to mock it, but to unmask it. He reveals that what we call personal striving is but a ripple in a larger ocean of will, endlessly churning without final rest. To see this is to realize why satisfaction is always fleeting, why peace always dissolves into new restlessness. Truth, then, is not found in fulfilling desire but in understanding the futility of the cycle itself. But there is more. Schopenhauer does not stop at metaphysics, he plunges into the existential consequences. If life is driven by a blind will, then suffering is not incidental, it is inevitable. For every act of striving carries within it tension, frustration, and incompleteness. Even pleasure, brief as it is, exists only as a temporary relief from pain, a pause before the next wave of craving. The human condition, in this light, is inseparable from suffering. Yet this recognition, as dark as it appears, contains the seed of a profound shift. By facing suffering honestly, without disguise or denial, we may arrive at compassion. For if all beings are but expressions of the same will, endlessly caught in its struggle, then the pain of another is not separate from our own. Compassion arises naturally, not as a moral commandment but as an existential truth. It is here that Schopenhauer's philosophy acquires a strange beauty. Though he begins with an almost brutal stripping away of illusions, he arrives at a vision that resonates with some of the deepest spiritual traditions. His recognition of the will parallels the Buddhist notion of craving, his acknowledgement of suffering echoes the first noble truth, and his call to compassion mirrors the path of selfless awareness. Yet he does not couch these insights in mystical language or divine authority, he grounds them in a relentless philosophical analysis. Thus, his philosophy bridges the divide between East and West, rational inquiry and existential awakening. Another essential theme lies in his view of art and contemplation. If the will is the storm, and representation the shifting clouds, then art becomes a moment of stillness. In the presence of beauty, whether in music, painting, or the written word, one may briefly transcend the restless striving of the will. Art offers a glimpse of truth not because it reveals the will directly, but because it suspends the machinery of desire, allowing us to inhabit pure perception. Music, in particular, he saw as the most direct expression of the will, a kind of universal language that bypasses representation and resonates with the core pulse of existence. To listen deeply is to touch the undercurrent of reality itself. These ideas are not dry abstractions. They are threads woven into the fabric of our daily existence. Every time we chase after happiness only to find it slipping away, we are enacting the rhythm of the will. Every moment we experience beauty that takes us outside of ourselves, we are tasting the freedom Schopenhauer gestures toward. Every act of empathy, where we feel another's suffering as our own, reveals that beneath the veil of separation lies a shared essence. Thus, his philosophy is not locked in dusty tomes but alive in every heartbeat, every yearning, every tear. The essence of Schopenhauer's truth is not to be taken as a set of doctrines but as an invitation. It is a challenge to look beneath appearances, to see that the solidity of the world is not what it seems, that the satisfaction of desire is a mirage, and that suffering is the universal condition. Yet it is also an invitation to live differently, to cultivate awareness, to practice compassion, and to find in art and contemplation moments of release. In this way, the core concepts are not ends in themselves but doorways, pointing toward a way of being that transcends illusion even while living within it. When philosophy reaches its most profound depths, it often turns to symbols and stories, for pure logic cannot always bear the weight of truths that exceed reason. Schopenhauer's vision, when translated into the language of narrative, acquires a different kind of power, less like a rigid argument and more like a mirror held up to the soul. His ideas invite us into parables and allegories, into mythic scenes where the hidden dynamics of existence can be glimpsed through image and metaphor. These stories are not to be taken literally but as keys, unlocking the chambers where rational thought falters yet understanding still dawns. Imagine, for a moment, a vast theater, its curtains heavy and golden, drawn back to reveal a stage upon which countless actors perform. They dance, they quarrel, they fall in love, they wage wars, they chase dreams, and they perish, all under the conviction that their roles are real. The audience, too, believes, swept away by the drama. But behind the stage, beyond the shimmering backdrop, there is a single puppeteer, faceless and tireless, pulling every string. The puppeteer does not discriminate, does not scheme, does not even seem aware of the story's unfolding, it only pulls the strings, endlessly, without rest. This puppeteer is the will. The actors are us. And the stage is the world of representation. In such a tale, truth is not the plot we believe we are living, but the recognition that the entire drama is animated by an unseen current. The tragedy and comedy of life, the grandeur of empires, and the quiet longing of a single soul, all are movements of this one puppeteer. To awaken is not to leave the stage but to glimpse, even briefly, the hand behind the curtain. Some may despair at this revelation, seeing life reduced to blind mechanics. Yet others may find in it a strange serenity, a freedom born of recognizing that the play, however beautiful or painful, was never ultimate reality. Another narrative might take the form of a desert traveler. He trudges across the burning sands, parched and weary, eyes fixed on the horizon where shimmering pools of water appear. He runs, desperate, only to find that the water recedes as he approaches. Again and again, he chases, believing the next oasis will finally quench his thirst. Yet each time, it vanishes. This is the story of desire, the eternal mirage of the will. Fulfillment seems always within reach, yet once attained, it dissolves, leaving the traveler with new thirsts, new illusions. The lesson here is not that water does not exist, but that the thirst itself is endless, and the mirage is the cycle we mistake for destiny. To understand this is to pause in the desert, to stop running, and in that stillness, perhaps to discover a deeper source of peace than the mirage could ever provide. Consider, too, the tale of a mountain climber who believes that reaching the peak will grant ultimate vision. He ascends with great struggle, clawing over rocks, pushing through storms, his body aching with each step. At last, he stands at the summit, triumphant, expecting to see the world as it truly is. Yet from the peak, all he sees is another, higher mountain beyond, obscured by clouds. He realizes, with a sinking heart, that the climb never ends. Each summit leads to another, higher still. This is the plight of human striving, the endless ascent driven by the will. But here lies the turning point. If the climber can pause, look not at the distant peak but at the horizon stretched around him, he may discover that the beauty of the journey was never in reaching the summit but in becoming aware of the endless striving itself. Schopenhauer himself turned to music as a kind of narrative beyond words. Imagine a symphony rising in the darkness of a concert hall. The violins tremble with longing, the drums thunder with conflict, the flutes carry fleeting joys. Each instrument seems to tell its own story, yet together they form a single tapestry of sound. To listen deeply is to hear the will speaking directly, not through representation but through resonance. Music becomes an allegory for existence itself, each life a melody, distinct yet inseparable from the larger composition. The truth, in this sense, is not found in isolating a single note but in recognizing the hidden unity that binds them all. Another allegory may be woven from the image of a river. At its surface, the river glitters under sunlight, reflecting trees, birds, and the sky above. One might believe this surface is the river's truth. But beneath, the current flows with unrelenting force, shaping its course, carrying silt and stone, eroding banks, carving valleys. The surface is representation, the play of appearances. The current is will, unstoppable, ceaseless. And we are like leaves floating, believing ourselves independent, unaware of the power that bears us along. The realization of truth comes when the leaf glimpses the current beneath, when it sees that its path is not entirely its own. This recognition does not halt the flow, but it changes the way the leaf drifts, it drifts with awareness. There is yet another symbolic image, that of a mask. Humanity wears masks, each painted with expressions of individuality, joy, sorrow, ambition, pride. We believe the mask is who we are, defending it, polishing it, fearing its loss. Yet when the mask slips, when suffering or revelation tears it away, we see not another mask beneath, but a facelessness, a common essence shared with all beings. That essence is the will, the undifferentiated force. The mask is representation. To realize this is to soften the boundaries between self and other, to recognize that behind the many faces lies the same faceless pulse. From this arises compassion, for in seeing the other suffer, we are reminded that their pain is not foreign but shared. These symbolic narratives do not replace philosophy but enrich it. They allow the heart to grasp what the mind alone cannot. They echo across cultures and traditions, reminding us that Schopenhauer's insights are not isolated but part of a universal thread running through human experience. The desert mirage recalls Buddhist teachings on craving, the endless mountain climb resonates with the Hindu cycle of samsara, the theater stage parallels Plato's allegory of the cave. Through story, the abstract becomes intimate, and the cosmic becomes personal. Thus, in the realm of symbolism, Schopenhauer's philosophy transforms from cold metaphysical assertion into a lived myth. It tells us that we are travelers in a desert, climbers on an endless mountain, actors on a stage, leaves upon a river, notes in a symphony. Each image points us toward the same truth: what we take as final is illusion, and behind the illusion lies a force both terrifying and liberating. To glimpse this truth is not to escape the play, but to awaken within it, carrying a different awareness, a different way of being. Philosophy risks becoming little more than a beautiful abstraction unless it can be lived. The question is not merely whether Schopenhauer was right about the world as representation and will, but what it means for us, here and now, as beings moving through the routines of daily life. It is one thing to stand in awe before the cosmic scale of illusion and truth, quite another to walk back into the ordinary patterns of work, relationships, ambition, and pain. Yet this is precisely where Schopenhauer's insights strike with their deepest relevance. They are not meant to be locked away in books, but to reconfigure the very texture of how we experience our existence. The first way this manifests is in our relationship with desire. Modern life is saturated with the promise of fulfillment, new technologies, possessions, achievements, and even curated identities all whisper to us that if only we acquire more, we will finally arrive at happiness. Schopenhauer's vision shatters this spell. By exposing the cycle of desire as endless, he helps us step outside the illusion that the next possession, the next success, or the next relationship will complete us. This does not mean that we must renounce all desires or live in sterile detachment. Rather, it means we can hold them lightly, engaging in the play of life without being consumed by the mirage. When we see desire for what it is, a movement of the will, we are less likely to confuse its satisfaction with final truth. This awareness alone can dissolve much unnecessary suffering, for we no longer expect from the world what it cannot give. The second implication lies in our encounter with suffering. Schopenhauer does not sugarcoat the reality that life is filled with pain, frustration, and loss. Yet to recognize suffering as a universal condition is to shift from resentment to understanding. The awareness that all beings are caught in the same web of striving cultivates compassion. A person who once judged others for their weaknesses begins to see those weaknesses as reflections of the same restless will they themselves endure. From this emerges a gentleness, a softening of the ego's harsh edges. Compassion ceases to be an abstract virtue and becomes a natural response to seeing ourselves in the struggle of others. The world becomes less about competition and more about recognition, less about domination and more about empathy. A third dimension of practical integration lies in the way we experience art and beauty. In a world driven by will, moments of stillness are rare treasures. Schopenhauer reminds us that art can momentarily suspend the endless striving, allowing us to step outside the machinery of desire. When we lose ourselves in a painting, a piece of music, or even the fleeting beauty of a sunset, we are granted a reprieve, a vision of the world not as an object of use or craving, but as pure appearance, untainted by wanting. To cultivate such moments is to cultivate sanity in a restless world. It is to remember that while we cannot abolish the will, we can taste freedom from its grip in brief but profound glimpses. This awareness makes the appreciation of beauty not a luxury, but a necessity for the soul. Daily life also confronts us with ambition and achievement. Society often teaches us to measure worth by status, wealth, or recognition. But when viewed through Schopenhauer's lens, ambition is merely another mask of the will, promising rest yet only perpetuating striving. This realization can radically shift our priorities. Success is no longer about climbing endless mountains, but about finding a balance between engagement and detachment. It encourages us to act without illusion, to contribute to the world while knowing that no achievement will bring ultimate completion. Paradoxically, this can make our actions more meaningful, for we act not from desperation but from a kind of freedom. We pursue goals with clarity, yet without being enslaved by them. The philosophy also invites a reevaluation of how we perceive selfhood. Most of us cling tightly to the idea of the separate self, defending its boundaries, cultivating its image, fearing its dissolution. Schopenhauer's recognition of the shared will dissolve this isolation. The self is no longer an island but a ripple in a vast ocean. This shift changes how we approach relationships, conflicts, and identity. To know that the same restless force animates both oneself and others is to erode the illusion of separation. This can open a door to deeper intimacy, greater forgiveness, and a more expansive sense of belonging. Furthermore, Schopenhauer's thought resonates with practices of mindfulness and meditation. To watch the movements of the mind without being consumed by them is to enact his invitation to see representation for what it is. In moments of stillness, when thought and desire quiet, we sense the possibility of stepping outside the grip of the will. Though temporary, these glimpses shift the way we live. They teach us that freedom is not found in conquering the world but in loosening the hold of illusion. What traditions like Buddhism articulate through discipline, Schopenhauer frames philosophically. The path to liberation is not through more striving but through awareness. Even in modern contexts, where science, technology, and consumerism dominate, the echoes of Schopenhauer are profound. Consider the endless scroll of social media, designed to keep us chasing attention, validation, novelty. It is the will dressed in digital clothing, pulling us through the same cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. To see this is not to condemn technology, but to awaken to its dynamics, to use it consciously rather than be used by it. In this sense, Schopenhauer's philosophy equips us to navigate the illusions of our time with greater clarity. At its heart, the integration of his thought into daily life requires a subtle shift in orientation. It is not about rejecting the world or sinking into nihilism, but about walking through the world with eyes open. To know that fulfillment will not be found in endless striving is not despair, it is liberation from false promises. To recognize suffering as universal is not resignation, it is the birth of compassion. To embrace beauty as a reprieve is not escapism, it is alignment with a deeper truth. And to see the self as part of a larger whole is not erasure, it is expansion. Thus, the practical implications of Schopenhauer's philosophy ripple into every corner of life. They reshape how we relate to desire, how we endure suffering, how we create and appreciate beauty, how we pursue ambition, and how we understand ourselves and others. The cosmic insight of illusion and will becomes, in this way, a guide for living not with naive hope for permanent satisfaction, but with wisdom, clarity, and compassion. It is a philosophy that strips away illusions, not to leave us empty, but to invite us into a way of being that is more real than the illusions we once clung to. Standing at the end of this journey, it becomes clear that the path through Schopenhauer's thought is not a simple circle of ideas but a spiral, carrying us deeper with every turn. We began at the surface, questioning the solidity of what we call truth. We descended through the core concepts of representation and will, wandered among symbolic landscapes where desire became desert mirages and life a theater of masks, and finally returned to the everyday, seeing how these insights touch the texture of our lives. Now, at this final point, what remains is not merely understanding but transformation, a call to live differently, to inhabit the world with a new clarity, as though the fog has lifted and the patterns of existence reveal themselves more nakedly than before. The first movement of transformation comes with the relinquishing of illusion. This does not mean despairing or denying life, but refusing to be enslaved by the false promises of endless desire. When we see that striving is ceaseless, that every summit only leads to another peak beyond, we are freed from the tyranny of expectation. We can still walk, climb, create, and love, but we do so with the recognition that no final resting place lies at the end of these pursuits. In this recognition is a paradoxical peace. The illusion breaks, and with it the fever of endless seeking begins to cool. Truth, then, is not possession but liberation, the loosening of the chains forged by our own longing. The second movement is the flowering of compassion. To see the world as well as to see that all beings share the same restless pulse. The suffering of another is not alien but a reflection of the same struggle within ourselves. When we touch this recognition, compassion ceases to be optional, it becomes the natural resonance of awareness. We soften toward others, not out of condescension but out of solidarity. This compassion is not sentimental but profound, rooted in the understanding that separation is illusion. In every cry, in every failure, in every fleeting joy of another, we hear the echo of our own being. And from this arises a quiet revolution, the choice to meet the world with kindness instead of cruelty, with patience instead of indifference. The third movement is the embrace of beauty as a doorway. Schopenhauer's insistence on the role of art reminds us that transcendence is not always grand or permanent. Sometimes it is as simple as the hush of a symphony, the glow of twilight on water, or the silence of a shared gaze. These moments suspend the tyranny of will and allow us to breathe outside the machinery of desire. They remind us that truth is not only a philosophical abstraction but something that can be tasted, here and now, in fleeting glimpses. To cultivate beauty is to cultivate windows into eternity, to weave into the fabric of daily life spaces where the noise subsides and we encounter a deeper stillness. The final movement is the expansion of self beyond the narrow cage of individuality. If the self is but a mask worn by the will, then awakening means seeing beyond the mask. We realize that the boundary between I and other is thinner than we imagined, more porous, more fluid. This does not erase individuality but reframes it. We are not isolated fragments but expressions of one essence, like waves upon the same sea. To live from this awareness is to carry humility and wonder. It is to know that our lives matter not because they stand apart, but because they participate in something greater, something timeless. In this way, Schopenhauer's vision, though often described as pessimistic, reveals itself as strangely luminous. He strips away illusions not to leave us in darkness but to guide us into a different kind of light, one that does not blind with false promises but illuminates with quiet clarity. His philosophy does not flatter us with certainty, nor does it hand us comforting dogmas. Instead, it calls us to awaken, to live without illusion, to face suffering honestly, to cultivate compassion, to savor beauty, and to recognize the shared pulse of existence. This is not despair but transformation, not resignation but awakening. And so the transformational call is this: live as though you have seen through the veil. Walk the world knowing that its glittering surfaces are appearances, and yet cherish them as appearances. Engage in the dance of desire, but without being ensnared by its promises. Face suffering with courage, both your own and that of others, knowing that it is the common fabric of life. Seek beauty not as escape but as revelation, as a reminder of the stillness that underlies the storm. And hold the self lightly, not as an island but as a wave, rising and falling with all others upon the same infinite sea. The world will not change its essence. The will continue to pulse, desire will continue to arise, suffering will remain part of the human story. But you can change the way you move within it. You can live awake. You can live with compassion. You can live with eyes open to beauty and a heart open to connection. This, perhaps, is what it means to stand in truth, not to grasp it like a possession but to live it as a way of being. Schopenhauer was right in ways that disturb, but he was also right in ways that liberate. His message is not a final word but a beginning, a turning of the gaze from illusion toward awareness. And the call he leaves us with is simple, yet profound: if you think you know truth, look again. The world may not be what it seems, but within that realization lies the possibility of becoming what we were meant to be, not prisoners of illusion, but seekers of clarity, bearers of compassion, and participants in the eternal unfolding of life itself.